If you overthink everything, psychology doesn't say your mind is too much. It says your mind is rare. Not broken. Not weak. Not unstable. Rare, because most people don't think deeply enough to overthink at all. They skim life on the surface. You don't. You replay conversations long after they end. You analyze decisions from every angle. You imagine outcomes that haven't happened yet, both good and bad. And somewhere along the way, someone probably told you that this means something is wrong with you. That you worry too much. That you think too much. That you should just relax. That you should stop overthinking. But psychology tells a very different story. And if you've ever felt misunderstood for the way your mind works, this channel was created for you. So before we go any further, subscribe to this channel. Because here, we don't try to silence deep minds. We help you understand them. What if the real issue isn't that you think too much, but that no one ever taught you how to direct a mind like yours? Because overthinking isn't random. It isn't chaos. It's structured. It follows patterns. And in many cases, it's linked to a specific set of traits that only a small percentage of people have. Traits that come with costs, yes, but also with depth, intelligence, and foresight most people never develop. Think about this. While others move quickly, you pause. While others act on impulse, you simulate consequences. While others are comfortable with uncertainty, your mind refuses to leave loose ends unresolved. You don't just want an answer. You want the right one. That difference alone changes how you experience the world. Your brain doesn't operate on autopilot. It operates on awareness. And let me ask you something honestly. Have you ever felt like your mind keeps working even when your body is exhausted? Like your thoughts don't shut off just because the day is over? If that feels familiar, that's not a coincidence. It's a clue. And if this already feels uncomfortably accurate, you're not alone. Many people think this way, they just don't talk about it. Now, before we go any further, it's important to understand what's actually happening inside your brain. Overthinking doesn't appear out of nowhere. It's shaped by neural pathways that strengthen over time. Your brain is plastic. What you repeat, it reinforces. That's called neuroplasticity. So if you've spent years rehearsing conversations, scanning for risks, analyzing outcomes, your brain didn't become worse. It became trained. And here's where most people misunderstand overthinking. It's not just thinking too much. It's a constant interaction between two systems. One emotional and protective, the limbic system. This is where threat detection and survival responses live. And one rational and planning-focused, the prefrontal cortex. This is where analysis, reasoning, and decision-making happen. When your limbic system senses uncertainty, your prefrontal cortex tries to solve it by thinking harder. And when thinking doesn't create certainty, your limbic system sends more stress signals. Cortisol rises. Your body tightens. Your thoughts speed up. This is a psychobiological response, not a personality flaw. That's why the harder you try to think your way out, the more trapped you can feel. Your body is asking for safety, and your mind keeps offering analysis. And yet, this same system that exhausts you is also the source of something rare. Because people who overthink don't just react to life. They anticipate it. And that brings us to the first rare trait. The first rare trait behind overthinking is this. Your brain is wired for anticipation, not reaction. You're not just worrying. You're forecasting. Your mind is constantly asking, what's coming next? What could go wrong? What will I need if it does? Psychology connects this to future-oriented cognition and threat anticipation. In simple terms, your brain is always scanning ahead. This trait didn't come from nowhere. It developed as a survival advantage. In early human history, the people who imagined worst-case scenarios weren't pessimists. They were the ones who survived. They noticed danger earlier. They planned for scarcity. They prepared while others lived moment to moment. That wiring didn't disappear. It evolved. So when your mind jumps ahead into future problems, it's not malfunctioning. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do. Protect you. While others walk blindly into situations, you've already rehearsed them mentally. You've thought about consequences. You've imagined outcomes. You've prepared for scenarios most people haven't even considered. Let me ask you something. Do you ever feel calmer only after you've made a backup plan? And maybe another one after that? Do you mentally rehearse conversations before they happen? Not because you're afraid, but because you want to be ready? That's anticipation. Your prefrontal cortex is simulating outcomes to reduce uncertainty. Because uncertainty signals danger to the limbic system. And when uncertainty stays unresolved, cortisol stays elevated. This is why people who overthink are often the ones others rely on in moments of crisis. You stay mentally ahead. You anticipate needs. You notice risks before they become obvious, even when it feels exhausting. This habit is rooted in intelligence and foresight. But there's a cost. When your brain never receives the message that the threat has passed, anticipation turns into constant scanning. Your nervous system stays alert. Your body never fully stands down. And that's when preparation starts to feel like anxiety. Here's the part most people don't realize. You don't overthink because you're scared. You overthink because your instinct is to be responsible, to be prepared, to avoid harm, to prevent regret. And yet, the same system that keeps you safe can also keep you tense long after the moment has passed, especially at night, when the world finally goes quiet and your brain doesn't know it's allowed to stop forecasting. This is the moment when anticipation quietly turns into hypervigilance. Your brain doesn't just prepare for what might happen. It starts watching constantly, just in case. And the problem is this. Your nervous system doesn't know how to tell the difference between a danger that already passed and a danger that might exist tomorrow. So even when nothing is happening, your body stays on alert. Your muscles don't fully relax. Your breathing stays shallow. Your thoughts keep scanning. Not because you're anxious by nature, but because your brain never received the signal. This situation is over. You're safe now. That's why nighttime overthinking feels so intense. There are fewer distractions. No new information. Nothing left to plan. So your brain keeps forecasting. Not because it wants to torture you, but because it hasn't been taught how to shut the radar off. But anticipation alone doesn't explain something else you experience. It doesn't explain why you replay conversations from years ago, or why a single awkward moment can loop in your mind for hours. That brings us to the second rare trait, one that has nothing to do with fear, and everything to do with care. The second rare trait behind overthinking is something most people completely misunderstand. People who overthink are often deeply concerned with emotional impact. You don't just ask, "What did I say?" You ask, "How did it land?" You replay interactions not to punish yourself, but to understand whether you hurt someone, disappointed them, or were misunderstood. Psychology links this to heightened emotional responsibility. You carry the emotional weight of interactions longer than most people do. While others move on quickly, your mind stays behind, reviewing, recalibrating, trying to understand the emotional ripple effect. Let me ask you something. Have you ever replayed a conversation and suddenly felt a tightness in your chest, just from remembering your tone? Have you ever thought, "I didn't mean it that way, but what if they heard it differently?" That reaction isn't weakness. It's your nervous system treating social safety as real safety. For the human brain, connection has always meant survival. When belonging feels uncertain, your limbic system responds the same way it would to physical threat. Cortisol rises. Your body becomes alert. Your mind searches for what went wrong. And this is why overthinkers are rarely careless with words. You choose them carefully. You measure tone. You consider timing and context. You don't want to cause harm, even accidentally. That's not insecurity. That's empathy with depth. And there's something important to understand here. This kind of empathy is tied to your brain's bonding chemistry. When connection feels secure, your system releases calming chemicals like oxytocin, signals of safety, trust, and warmth. But when connection feels unclear, your brain doesn't get that signal. So it keeps reviewing the interaction, hoping clarity will restore emotional balance. That's why unanswered messages linger in your mind. Why unresolved tension drains you. Why emotional ambiguity feels heavier than open conflict. This is also why emotionally responsible people are so often misunderstood. From the outside, your awareness can look like sensitivity. Your reflection can look like overreaction. Your care can look like insecurity. But what's actually happening is much deeper. You're not reacting to emotions. You're tracking consequences. You understand that words don't disappear after they're spoken. That tone carries meaning. That moments leave impressions. So when others say, just move on. They don't realize your nervous system is still doing its job, making sure connection is stable, repair is possible, and nothing important was damaged. That level of emotional accountability is rare. And when it's not recognized, it often gets mislabeled as weakness. You're not obsessed with the past. You're trying to restore equilibrium. And this trait has a quiet strength. People who overthink are often the most emotionally intelligent in the room. You read between the lines. You sense shifts before they're spoken. You notice what others ignore. But that same sensitivity can become exhausting when the world expects you to just move on. Because your nervous system doesn't move on until it feels safe. And that brings us to something deeper. Because emotional responsibility alone doesn't explain why your mind feels tired even when nothing obvious is happening. It doesn't explain why you can feel drained after a simple interaction, or why rest doesn't always feel restful. For that, we need to talk about the third rare trait, the way your brain processes reality itself. The third rare trait behind overthinking is something many people never have language for. People who overthink don't just think more. They process deeper. You don't skim reality. You absorb it. Your brain notices details others filter out automatically. A slight change in someone's tone. A pause before a reply. A shift in energy in a room that no one else seems aware of. While others experience life in broad strokes, you experience it in layers. Psychology connects this to heightened cognitive processing, and in many cases, heightened sensory awareness. Your brain takes in more information per moment than average, and instead of discarding it, it tries to make sense of it. That's why you often feel mentally tired even after doing nothing. You weren't doing nothing. Your mind was processing thousands of signals. The world never asked you to notice. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt exhausted after a normal day and wondered why you were so tired when nothing particularly dramatic happened? That fatigue isn't laziness. It's cognitive load. Your prefrontal cortex has been working constantly, organizing information, checking for consistency, trying to integrate experiences into a coherent picture. This is also why loose ends bother you so deeply. Unanswered messages, unclear relationships, decisions made without enough information. They don't just annoy you mentally. They create discomfort in your body. Psychology refers to this as sensitivity to cognitive closure. Your brain wants coherence. It wants things to make sense. When they don't, your mind keeps returning to the same thought. Not to torture you, but to resolve the inconsistency. That's why uncertainty drains you more than effort. Effort has shape. Uncertainty doesn't. Imagine two people leaving the exact same conversation. One of them notices the words that were said, decides it was fine, and moves on. The other notices the pause before the reply, the shift in tone, the moment where something felt slightly off. Both experienced the same event, but only one of them processed it in layers. That difference isn't intelligence, it's depth. And when you process life this way, your brain doesn't let go easily, not because you're stuck, but because it hasn't finished integrating the experience yet. And here's something else most people misunderstand. From the outside, deep processors can look slow, passive, or unmotivated. But on the inside, your mind has been running nonstop. You don't just live through experiences. You dissect them. You reflect on them. You try to understand what they mean. This depth gives you insight, but it also makes rest difficult. Your brain doesn't shut down easily because it doesn't believe the work is finished. There's always another layer to understand, another angle to examine. And this leads directly into the next rare trait, one that most people never connect to overthinking. Because when a mind like yours has no direction, its greatest strength can turn inward, and that strength is imagination. The fourth rare trait behind overthinking is one that often surprises people. People who overthink usually have a powerful imagination. Overthinking is imagination without direction. Your mind is exceptionally good at creating scenarios, connections, and possibilities. It can visualize conversations before they happen. It can imagine outcomes before decisions are made. It can run entire situations start to finish, all in your head. Psychology has found strong links between imagination, creativity, and anxiety. Not because creativity causes anxiety, but because unused creative energy turns inward. The same mental ability that allows artists to create, strategists to plan, and innovators to build, is the same ability your mind uses to imagine worst-case scenarios. And when that energy has no meaningful outlet, it doesn't go quiet. It turns against you. Let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed that your mind feels calmer when you're deeply engaged in something complex or meaningful, but becomes restless and intrusive when you're bored or understimulated? That's not coincidence. Your brain's motivation system is driven by dopamine. Dopamine activates anticipation, curiosity, and problem-solving. When your imagination has a clear target, dopamine helps you focus. When it doesn't, your mind starts generating problems instead of solutions. There's an important distinction most people never learn. Anxiety-driven imagination asks, what if everything goes wrong? Creative imagination asks, what could I build with this? The ability is the same. The direction is different. When your imagination has no clear purpose, it fills the space with threats. But when it's given meaning, it becomes one of your greatest strengths. The difference isn't talent. It's direction. You mentally rehearse conversations again and again. You imagine how things could go wrong. You replay scenarios that haven't even happened yet. This isn't madness. It's a mind asking for something worthy of its capacity. Many overthinkers notice something important over time. When they're given a real challenge, something that fully absorbs their attention, their thoughts quiet down naturally, not because the mind is weaker, but because it finally has direction. You weren't built for boredom. You were built for complexity. And when complexity is missing, your imagination creates it. But imagination alone doesn't explain why your mind keeps revisiting decisions long after they've been made. It doesn't explain why good enough never feels good enough. For that, we need to talk about the fifth rare trait, the one that makes overthinking feel so exhausting, and yet so hard to let go of. The fifth rare trait behind overthinking is the one that explains why it feels so exhausting, and yet so hard to stop. People who overthink often have unusually high internal standards. You don't want average outcomes. You don't want rushed decisions. You don't want things that feel good enough on the outside, but wrong on the inside. Your mind keeps revisiting choices because you're trying to close the gap between reality and your ideal. Psychology refers to this as conscientious depth. It's the drive to do things properly, ethically, meaningfully, while others are comfortable settling. Your mind keeps asking, is this really the best option? Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt more stressed doing something halfway right than doing nothing at all? That's not procrastination. That's integrity. And here's why this trait is so difficult to live with. Your brain has learned a pattern. If I keep thinking, I can prevent regret. So overthinking becomes a form of protection, a safety behavior. Even when it hurts you, your nervous system believes it's helping. This is where cognitive behavioral patterns come into play. Your thoughts loop not because they're useless, but because your brain hasn't received permission to stop. And this is where chemistry matters. When your standards are constantly pressuring you, your system struggles to settle. Levels of serotonin, the chemical linked to emotional stability, don't fully normalize. You can achieve things and still feel on edge, because what your system is really seeking isn't success. It's internal permission to rest. Let me ask you another question. Do you ever notice that even after making the right decision, your mind keeps checking it, just in case? That's not doubt. That's responsibility taken too far. Your prefrontal cortex keeps scanning for alignment between your actions and your values. And when alignment feels incomplete, your mind stays active. But here's the truth most people never tell overthinkers. Your high standards aren't the enemy. There's a critical difference that often gets overlooked. High standards are about values. Self-worth is about identity. When those two get tangled, every mistake feels personal. Every delay feels like failure. Every decision feels like a test of who you are. Your mind keeps revisiting choices, not because you're never satisfied, but because you want your actions to reflect who you believe yourself to be. When standards are separated from self-worth, they guide you. When they're fused together, they exhaust you. Learning that distinction is what allows high standards to become a compass, not a punishment. They're the reason you produce thoughtful work. They're the reason your decisions have depth. They're the reason people trust your judgment. The problem isn't that you care too much. The problem is that no one ever showed you how to hold high standards without turning them into self-punishment. And this is where everything begins to shift. Because when you understand what your mind has been trying to do, overthinking stops feeling like a flaw and starts looking like a signal that your mind wants clarity, alignment, and meaning. And in the final part, we're going to put everything together. We're going to reframe overthinking completely, not as something to eliminate, but as something to understand, respect, and direct. Because once you see the full picture, you'll stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" And you'll start asking a much better question. What is my mind actually capable of? By now, you can probably see it clearly. Overthinking was never the enemy. It only felt that way because no one ever explained what it actually was. You were given labels instead of understanding. You were told to quiet your mind instead of learning how to work with it. And over time, that made you doubt something that was never meant to be doubted. Your mind. So let's put everything together. You anticipate because your brain is future-oriented. You replay moments because you care about emotional impact. You feel exhausted because you process life deeply. You imagine endlessly because your creativity has no off switch. You hesitate because your standards are higher than average. None of this points to weakness. It points to a mind that refuses to live on autopilot. Most people don't question their thoughts. You question everything. Most people accept simple explanations. You look for underlying causes. Most people are comfortable with ambiguity. You want clarity. And that difference changes how you experience life. Your mind doesn't just react to events. It evaluates them. It checks for consistency. It asks whether things align with your values, your understanding, your sense of truth. That's why unresolved situations bother you so deeply. Loose ends don't just feel annoying. They feel physically uncomfortable. Psychology refers to this as sensitivity to cognitive closure. Your brain wants coherence. It wants things to make sense. When they don't, your mind keeps returning to the same thought, not to punish you, but to resolve the inconsistency. This is why unanswered messages linger, why unclear relationships drain you, why decisions made without enough information feel unbearable. Your brain doesn't tolerate randomness easily, not because you're rigid, but because you're meaning-oriented. You're constantly trying to integrate experiences into a larger understanding of how things work. And here's something most people never realize about overthinkers. You are often more self-aware than the people around you. You reflect on your motives. You question your reactions. You try to understand your blind spots. That level of self-reflection is rare. It also explains why you're harder on yourself than others are. When something goes wrong, you don't just blame the situation. You analyze your role in it. You ask whether you acted fairly, kindly, wisely. This doesn't mean you enjoy self-criticism. It means you hold yourself to a standard most people never even consider. And while that can turn into self-doubt when it's unchecked, it's also the foundation of growth, ethics, and emotional intelligence. People who never overthink rarely grow deeply. They repeat the same patterns without noticing them. You don't. You notice everything. But here's the paradox. And this is where so much unnecessary suffering comes from. The same mind that gives you insight also gives you anxiety. The same depth that makes you compassionate also makes you vulnerable. The same awareness that makes you thoughtful also makes you tired. That's why telling an overthinker to stop thinking never works. Thinking isn't a habit for you. It's a core function. Your mind is designed to explore, connect, and evaluate. When that function is suppressed, the energy doesn't disappear. It turns inward. That's also why distraction rarely works long-term. You can stay busy, but the moment things slow down, your thoughts come rushing back. Not because you're broken, but because your mind is trying to do what it does best. Understand. So let's say this clearly. You are not overthinking because something is wrong with you. You are overthinking because your mind is active, complex, and deeply engaged with reality. The real problem isn't that you think too much. It's that no one ever taught you how to work with a mind like yours. And when a complex system isn't understood, it feels like chaos. But when it is understood, it becomes a powerful tool. And if this kind of explanation helps you feel more grounded, more understood, this is exactly what this channel is about. So if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel. Because here, we don't try to silence deep minds. We help you work with them. Now, there's one more thing I want to offer you. If you want to go deeper into this work, I created a practical guide to emotional self-mastery to support you. It was designed to help you regulate your emotions, stop overreacting or oversharing, and build inner stability, step by step at your own pace. I've left the guide in the pinned comment below. Here's the shift that changes everything. You don't need to think less. You need to think with direction. Your mind doesn't need to be silenced. It needs something worthy of its attention. When overthinkers learn this, something subtle but profound happens. The same awareness that once created anxiety starts creating clarity. The same depth that once felt isolating starts to feel like quiet strength. You stop fighting your thoughts. You start listening to them. And when you stop treating your mind like a problem, you realize something important. It's actually a resource, a sophisticated one. So the next time your thoughts start spiraling, remember this. Your mind isn't attacking you. It's asking for meaning, for direction, for something worthy of its depth. You don't need to become less sensitive. You don't need to become less thoughtful. You don't need to become more like everyone else. You just need to stop believing that depth is a flaw, because in a world full of impulsive reactions, shallow certainty, and careless decisions, people who think deeply are rare and necessary. Before you go, let me ask you something gently. Which part of this described you the most? The anticipation, the empathy, the exhaustion, the imagination, or the high standards? You don't need to explain your answer. Just noticing it is enough. And if this video made you feel understood in a way you're not used to, stay here. This channel exists for people who feel too deep, think too much, and were never meant to live on the surface. You don't overthink because you're weak. You overthink because your mind is powerful. And now, you finally know why. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next video.